Cool. So this is kind of a back by popular demand type thing. Again, we just wanted to take a minute, talk about the raid. I know everyone's been really focused in on all things gearing, item level. We have a lot of people climbing on the item level ladder, which is awesome. For those of you who aren't as familiar with WoW Audit, you can make a copy of this sheet directly in WoW Audit, regardless of your permission status. Just by being on the roster, you can make a copy of the sheet. If you haven't worked with WoW Audit sheets before, just know that it's out here. We do have the ability to monitor all sorts of fun things, enchants, vault options, roster, raid. We don't really use the raid tab too much, but we can also deep dive onto specific folks. But the main thing that officers are going to be sort of peeping at, just so that everyone's aware, yes, we are big brothering you, for mythic pluses, right? To try and get a sense for, our folks meeting the requirements that I know Ferris shared in the raid channel. So just as a heads up, we do have some transparency into that. We have two pillars, like how many keys are people doing on average, and then what are you getting out of your box this week, right? So this is something that's just like automatically pulled from WoW Audit. The item level thing isn't super accurate because it's just whatever gear you logged out in. If you have a jank set for keys or for PvP or something, your item level will be all over the place. But it's something that we do take a look at for outliers. So Coolgon, Revtide, and Codex down here really slacking. But just as a heads up for folks, this does exist. I know we had some questions on it before we dive into raid specific stuff. But again, if you aren't familiar with WoW Audit, you can just go to WoW Audit, go to the dashboard, and make your own super fun spreadsheet if you do want to. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no gating here because we have that Patreon status. So, but if folks are curious, you can always do that in WoW Audit. Okay. Raid time. Just from like a general sense, looking at chats, it seems like some folks are familiar with the raid and started to sort of peep through raid plans. I kind of want to take 10 minutes per boss. There are a few key things to highlight. The exception to the 10 minutes per boss rule is the last two, where we're gonna need a little bit more time. My goal is to kind of keep this under an hour. Do I expect everyone to come away with this with all the latest mythic strats? No, but it's just kind of knowing what to expect next week, right? And similar to previous tiers, this is going to be a tier where we are trying to make the most out of tier drops and making sure that everyone has what they need, because tier is ever impactful. So knowing bosses across difficulties is going to be good. The main part is really the mythic progression, of course, at the end of the day, and so each boss does have a mythic specific tab. If you haven't worked with raid plan before, just know that all of the links are in the channels. You shouldn't be able to edit them yourself without first making a copy, but you can kind of see what's out there moving. We do also have, last thing, and then we'll actually dive into the raid plans themselves. I'm going to pull Discord over here for a second. We do also have, oh, you guys actually can't see Discord. Let me fix that. Apologies. Screen 1. There we go. Infinite. We do also have a Synapse specific weak aura pack. For those who were super quick and downloaded the weak aura pack that I posted at the onset, which was just like the DF Raid 1 weak aura pack, we do have a Synapse specific pack, which includes some additional auras that we'll be using for kick automation. Everything should be set up. Obviously, I haven't been able to test it, but there are a lot of random kicks across fights that we're going to need to manage. So I think we've got everything set up in there. I'll be working with the other officers so that they know how to tweak this stuff. It looks like we've only had a couple of people coming up and grabbing it, which is okay, but just know that ahead of the raid, that weak aura pack, which is linked in the Vault of the Incarnates channel is going to be required. So just so folks are aware, it does include the DF Raid 1 pack, and I'll be updating that kind of as we roll through. But you should only just need this one. It is available if you're someone who's big into the Weak Aura add-on. You can just put it in here, but I'll be doing my best to actually version maintain it across bosses and as things bake in. We might pull in other Weak Auras, but the goal will be to eventually kind of consolidate it all in one place so that folks know where to get stuff. Okay. Boss time. Let me pause super quick. Does anyone have questions pre-boss time?
You said the Weak Aura pack has the raid pack already in it?
Yes. It has DF1 in
Okay.
it.
But not the co-tank or anything?
No, it does not have co-tank.
Okay.
I didn't want to make everyone import that.
No, that's cool. I just want to know. Sorry.
No. It's a very fair question. But everything else from like a mandatory perspective should be there. At least that we know of yet, right? We're only working off beta info here, so I'm sure there will be developing info the first week of raid. But okay, boss time. So this is a raid with an awesome difficulty curve. I'm really excited about it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. We are looking at a couple of really straightforward bosses right out the gate, but with enough going on that they're not snooze fests. So I kind of want to just talk about them in the order that we'll encounter them. So there's 8 boss raid, right? We only know about 7 of them. Razageth we'll get to, but the first one's Aranog. Aranog's super easy from what I can tell. It's basically just a rinse and repeat fight from a phase 1, phase 2 split. Phase 1 is fire management, quite literally. People will get marked with fire. They'll go put that fire down. Ads will spawn from the fire. And kind of Sylvanas style, we just slow kite our way, or not Sylvanas style. Sylvanas style, we slow the ads and nuke them down. They do fixate, is my understanding, at least as of now. It's unclear in the journal. But the goal is to just have our raid pretty tight, and we'll slowly move our way around the room. The boss will cast Pyroblast. That's something that we'll need to make sure we get kicked. And the biggest thing, just from a DPS perspective, is that we're always dropping flame rifts behind the boss. So when you, or not in the direction of travel. The closer we get them, the easier the fight is, and that becomes super important later on. An errant flame patch somewhere where we will be going can kill the group, and not just because it limits a tiny little space of the room, but because of phase 2. So kind of what does dropping a flame patch look like, right? This is just a clip from the Stanky video, which is in the Aranog specific channel. When you get the Flame Rift debuff on you, you have 4 seconds, you get this big ol' arrow, you group up with your friends, it drops a portal. Ads spawn out of that portal, right? And these guys you can just kill. On Heroic, it's only these little ads. They just run at people, right? Super straightforward. Just nuke them down and then go back to killing the boss. There's not a lot to be said for phase 1 here other than don't mess up where you're putting fire. It's fairly straightforward. Phase 2, though, is where things get a little bit fun. Kind of painsmithy a little bit, in that you have a wall of death kind of moving across a platform. In this case, it's from the outside in. The way that phase 2 and phase 1 interact, however, is if one of the little ads touches a flame patch, it becomes immune and unattackable. So it's important that we manage our flame patches effectively so that we don't run out of room during a phase 2, or we won't be able to kill an ad and we'll all die. So generally, the way that the fight goes, right, is we're slowly moving around the room. Tanks are keeping the boss a little bit ahead of where the flame patches are, not right on top of it, but with room to spare. Ranged melee healers, anyone who gets a flame patch is dropping it behind the boss. You turn and kill the ads, and then you're going back to trimming the boss, right? It's a fairly straightforward fight. In phase 2, we'll always kill the first ad that won't immune by touching a flame rift. So in the example we were moving counterclockwise, what that looks like is we're always going to kill the ad closest to the flame rifts who won't pass through them. We'll likely get some real-time marking set up for that while we're in the fight. But just for your benefit, so you can kind of see what it looks like in phase 2, basically a bunch of ads spawn. You can see, let me see if I go to a good angle of this. These 2 ads are much bigger than the rest and have a giant shield. They are immune. They cannot be damaged. This ad won't go through a flame. Actually, he might. Yeah, he will go through a flame patch there, and he becomes immune. So even that one patch that he went through on the very edge is enough to make him immune. So the raid needs to kill this ad, would be the one that we kill. We would mark it, you would burn it, and then it breaks this link of fire so that you can run through. If you don't break the link of fire, you die. So that's pretty much the whole fight. It's a fairly straightforward first boss. Drop fire, kick boss, kill ad, profit. The boss isn't immune during the ad phase, so depending on our damage, we may have, especially in Mythic, we may have melee starting to trim the boss, depending on what that looks like. But at the surface, especially in normal and heroic, we'll just be killing the ad and getting back to the boss. Because once the ad's dead, there's nothing to worry about. You can just bing, bang, boom on the boss. Any questions on normal and heroic difficulty?
Are the ads that spawn in P1, are they CCable?
Yes, they can be slowed, rooted. I don't know about stunned, but definitely slowed and rooted. I think even in the clip you can see a binding shot go off. So I guess stunned. Yes, stunned. Shadow Fury crashes there. So definitely CCable.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Yep. The only difference, well, there's 2 differences. The big difference on Mythic is in the intermission or phase 2, you not only have ads coming outside in, but you also have ads going inside out. So you'll need to split up damage in Mythic and kill both walls of fire. If you look here, you've got these elementals coming from the inside out, as well as a line of elementals out of frame coming outside in. So this will be somewhere where you need to split up the raid, otherwise you get sandwiched between fire. So it just is a slightly harder DPS check, but otherwise Mythic is not that different from Heroic. This is a pretty straightforward boss. The only other change is tanks. The tank mechanic will also spawn a big flame patch. So it's relevant where you guys drop your thing, and out of that, a bigger ad will spawn that also needs to be kicked. So you have to kick not only Aranog with a kick rotation, but also a new ad. Also a new ad. Let me see if I have an example of that. It's called the Flame Rift Captain. Yeah, there you go. So there's this guy who casts and the main guy who will also cast. So you have to kill both of them because the pyroblasts that they cast do like 80% of someone's health. If they go off, it's likely to kill someone, especially on Mythic. So we'll work with, from a raid leadership standpoint, to get up quick marks. I don't think there's going to be any sort of auto marking that's done here because it's not like the spike balls on Painsmith where it's always kill the outside one or always kill the center one, right, across difficulties. It's based on where we put the rifts. So if someone messes up a rift and an ad's going to immune, we have to recognize that and move on to the next ad. The ads in the intermission can't be slowed or CC'd in any way, so it's just kill them before they kill you. And that's Aranog. From a weak aura standpoint, and I can actually let me do this because I do think it is helpful, just so that folks know what we're doing. I do have draft notes. I haven't posted them for the broader group yet, but across the different bosses, for auto kicks, auto marking, auto allocation on Taros. So we've got a lot of that stuff set up. It's all based off of the dynamic build that we eventually got working on Pantheon, right? But the weak aura foundationally is just, so for Aranog as an example, it's just going to mark Aranog for interrupts. The raid lead weak aura will automatically mark Aranog, and it'll control how many how kicks go out. So it's all auto set up. No one has to do anything. We just have to get the note configured, and we should be good to go. So it's fairly straightforward. Did I hear a question there?
No, it was excitement.
Oh, a yay. Okay.
Sorry.
No, you're good. I love a yay. All right. That's first boss. Fairly straightforward. It's a fun fire maze. Any other questions on Taros?
Yeah, it's not about Terrace, but I'll just ask
Or
it
on
now.
Aranog, sorry.
For anybody that doesn't have like a specific like set build for any of these fights and any of these things that are coming up, do you want us to like determine, or do you need to determine, like that's got ads and then single target, right? Like, so
Yeah.
do you want like how do you want people speccing, or do you
We will
wanna
play it
do-
by ear.
Yeah.
Generally, you would want
Yeah.
like we'll start with like majority single target, and then obviously
Yeah.
if we need to swing one way or the other, we can always make those moves on the call. We kind of
Yeah.
The preference,
I only asked
the preference
because, like,
will almost always be for single target if we're choosing
Right.
between the two, especially
Yeah.
for progression. Yeah.
Right. I just asked because some of the Ellie things were like, it can do both. So for this fight, it doesn't really matter.
Pick.
Do what your raid
Yeah.
needs. Right. So like that's
Yeah.
why I was curious. So
Generally, we'll need more boss damage, especially early in Prague, as we're still getting gear. But eventually, if we start missing ad checks, there's some bosses later in here where we may need folks to go AoE. But how many and how often will kind of be done a little bit on the fly. We'll kind of have to tease it out because they just did a whole health tuning pass on the raid. So TBD. But good question. Good question. Okay. And any other Aranog or general items? If not, we can pivot on over to my boy Rockman. Okay. Taros is another fairly straightforward boss. He's anchored in the middle of the room. Tanks, your big thing is basically you're playing Halandris again. You're blowing up things with beams. Raid, you're not standing in the beams. That's kind of the gist of it. So tanks, you always have to be near the boss. Your beam goes behind you. If you leave the boss, he ends up doing like triple damage from range to the active tank. So he doesn't, unlike other bosses, he doesn't just start pulsing group damage, but he will do a very quick cast that does way more than his regular melee swings.
Swap after every clear too, right? Or-
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
because of that
Yeah.
debuff. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Rec
That's right.
is in here, by the way, but
That's okay.
I'll be sure and coordinate with him on that.
Yeah, and I am recording this. I'll stick it up on our little YouTube channel so we can roll too. So nothing too crazy. There's a couple of things here. There's a lot of this fight isn't mechanically complex. What makes it tricky are the overlaps. So there's a whole group soak mechanic where damage gets split based on who's in the debuff. One person gets marked. You bring it into melee. The tank that's not debuffed can also soak, but we want it in melee so that melee can keep hitting the boss. At the same time, another mechanic goes out where you'll spawn a little pillar. Those pillars are just do damage to the raid while they're active, and the tanks will use their Halandris beams to crack them. On heroic, you just crack every beam every time, because whenever a set of beams, or what's the right wording for this? Whenever beams get cracked, if there's a mechanic that cracks beams, the raid gets a debuff that does ticking damage. So pillars being up does ticking damage. when pillars break, when a set of pillars breaks, the raid gets a debuff. So, if the pillars were like this and the tanks had to break it in 2 sets, the raid gets 2 debuffs. If we drop the pillars in a good way where they're kind of in a line near enough to each other where the beam can hit all of them, and we crack them, even though we're cracking 4 in both cases, cracking them in one go only gives us 1 stack of the debuff. So this is basically a positioning check. And there's a couple of other things going on, but the main gist of it is if you don't have a debuff, you're stacking in the big soak split. If you do have a debuff, you're going behind the soak split so that shortly, like basically immediately after this soak split, the tank beam can crack the pillars in one bang. And so you want each set of spikes to hit as many spikes as you can. Again, on heroic, on mythic, it's a little different because the damage is a lot more. But the gist of it is soak thing, place pillars, tank breaks beam. The last piece of the puzzle here is every I think it's time based, not percent health based, similar to Denathrius. So again, kind of a DPS check. The boss will cut the room into 5ths on heroic and 4ths or quarters on mythic. That action also breaks spikes. So if we fall behind on spike cracking for some reason, or like we have whether it's a tank miss or like an errant spike, we run the risk of getting more debuffs over time when we do sort of move through the different phases. The last thing that happens is when outside of that stack and spike mechanic, the boss will occasionally just like put puddles near people. The puddles will also break spikes. It doesn't just go like directly on top of a person. It's kind of nearby. So it's not an exact science, but what that means is if you're a DPS or healer, at no point, unless you need to stack for something, should you be standing near spikes, because you might break them and cause us to take more raid damage. So it's just a positioning dance. It's get in, get out, get in, get out, and we'll take a look at kind of what that looks like in a fight scenario. So the first thing here, this big yellow circle is the stack on me mechanic. So the whole raid's gonna go stack in, except for the people who get these little yellow arrows and circles above their heads. So the people who get debuffs, they're coming to the back. Everyone else, you're going up to split the damage. So you'll see that movement happen here shortly. A couple of the ranged folks here are lazy, but you'll see there's 4 debuffs. So I've got now pillar, 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 pillar. They did a bad job here. They can't hit all of these with one Halandris beam. But you'll see that. So you'll see here, right there. So this beam, which is kind of a faint yellow on brown impression, is only going to hit 3 of the 4 spikes. So what that means is you're going to get 2 stacks of this debuff at minimum for how these are cracked. And so they've already cracked 4 different instances of pillars, or they've cracked pillars 4 times. And so this is just a ramping damage debuff on the raid, and the pillars being active also does ramping damage on the raid. So the more pillars, the more damage. So it's just all about managing those. So if you get the yellow, take them out, make a line. If you don't get the yellow, stack in the big swirly, right? The last thing here is you just kind of create dust under you. So here again, this is a much better, this was perfect positioning. The raid is up here, stacked in, right? And then you've got your pillars in a line. You can easily crack these with a beam. These other little yellow bits here are the puddles which are left sort of targeting players. So you'll see in just a second another set of those go out. If there were beams alive, and there will be instances when this overlaps on the raid, if there are beams alive, when these little yellow circles come out, if this yellow circle overlaps with a pillar, so swirly on pillar cracks, you get another debuff stack. So it's possible that small errors can lead us to become super behind from a healer perspective on this fight. So the wipes on this aren't going to be immediately evident unless we get a ton of stacks very early, but it'll kind of creep up on us toward the end of the fight as the damage is ramping from multiple different sources. Okay? That's the gist of Heroic. It's a fairly straightforward fight, right? Just get in for the yellow soak, get out, and make a line if you have the Awakened Earth. Tanks, you know your thing. And then while there are pillars, don't be near them. It's fairly straightforward. Any heroic questions here? Okay. On Mythic, the position is a little bit different. On Mythic, the damage is more variable. The shattering of pillars does a lot more damage. There aren't really new. There's one new mechanic, but it doesn't really matter for the hard overlaps of the fight. So instead of big yellow soaky thing goes out, pillars go behind it. The pillars also need to split the damage of big yellow soaky thing, right? So what that means is if you don't have a pillar, you're smushed here in the middle. If you do have a pillar, you'll be on one of the sides. We have a weak aura to manage split across sides for Taros. So it basically, if you get Awakened Earth, you'll get an arrow that tells you to go to the left side of the group or the right side of the group. This custom ratio, and actually I need to re-upload this. I didn't realize I didn't have that checked. I can do that. It will basically, depending on damage, we'll feel it out, but we'll adjust how many go left and how many go right, i.e. how many beams are we shattering at once, as we get a feel for that damage. But that is also something that we can, again, just assign in the note. It's fairly straightforward, so we'll be able to tinker with that on Mythic. But as just a raider, if you're not messing with MRT notes, you can just go where the arrow says. And again, you're making a line either to the left or the right of the raid in that instance, unlike Heroic where you're making a line behind the raid. Okay? And the last thing to note is the Denathrius cone that he does, where he cuts the room into fifths and quarters. It doesn't center on like where the most crap is. It centers on a random player. So we don't, if someone is standing way over here, it's possible that the boss takes away all of this unused space and we run out of room faster. So you don't want to be in the middle of nowhere here. It's important that you always sort of collapse back in with the raid so that as we do phase, those cones go in a good spot. Okay? The only other... I did say the mythic mechanic doesn't matter, because it really doesn't. The mythic specific mechanic outside of things hurt more, it's called reactive dust. It's like Anduin a little bit, in that you get reactive dust and you have to go hug a friend who also has reactive dust. There's just no purple meet yellow or die. It's just when you guys touch, you take a little bit of damage, and you spawn a pillar under you. These pillars are different than the other pillars. They just sort of pop up and knock you up and then don't happen anymore. The knock up, so here you can see kind of
down and
from
then
start
spawns.
to finish. Oh, I unmuted. Here you can see start to finish. Here's a person with dust. Here's a person with dust. They're going to touch. Oh, they touched. It makes this circle on the ground. Anyone who's in that circle when it goes off gets spiked up. You get knocked up into the air and take a fair bit of damage. So here's someone who's going to get he gets spiked. You get knocked up. You can see he dropped to about 50%, right? So just don't get spiked. There doesn't seem to need to be a big ado about get out, stack in, manage the dust stacks. Multiple people can clear with each other. So as that mechanic goes out, just don't stand in other stuff and kind of touch each other. And it should just auto-resolve. So the mythic mechanic here seems very straightforward. Unless they massively change the damage. You'll see here, I think 4 people at once remove one set of debuffs and they spawn one pillar. So very likely, as that mechanic's going out, we'll want to stack as a raid. And if we do have any stragglers, we might like have someone step out. But our goal will be to just clear that as quick as possible, because that dot on top of everything else that's happening in the fight, especially later in the fight, will hurt a lot. And it does like 11k every 0.5 seconds. So the faster you clear it, the better. It's not something where we have to have exactly 2 people always touching. And that's one that I think will kind of just honestly sort itself out on Mythic. Any other Taros specific things, guys? Quiet crew. Okay.
If these fights, real quick, sorry. If
Yeah,
these fights are easy early Mythic, is there any incentive to go do these early instead of late bosses heroic, or do we get more out of doing late heroic?
So it's only really worth it if you can get all the way past Council, because like Council has the big item level jump. The late heroic bosses are very close to Mythic Eye level. But we'll probably, again, we won't like force, if AOTC is very hard, which I'm expecting it will be, at least for the first week or two, because we know nothing about Razagath. We'll probably foray into Mythic, but almost as likely we'll pull tier out of normal too, because the tier breakpoints are going to be important.
I was just going to mention that the earlier bosses aren't dropping tier, it's the mid and later bosses. So the likelihood that we push further into normal or heroic is going to be higher than pushing just the first couple out of Mythic.
Yeah. It's really only worth going into Mythic if you can get 3 down on Mythic, and Council has a lot more going on than the first 2. So let's talk about Council. So Council is a typical Council fight. There's 4 bosses. They do things. They conflict with each other. This fight has a lot going on. It kind of starts like Phase 4 of Pantheon, where you have 2 bosses that need to be kicked constantly. We'll have a kick rotation set up for it, but it's going to be super important that those happen. We have weak auras and auto markers that handle that for us. Again, the raid lead will auto mark what needs to be kicked. The note will configure who's kicking what where. Again, for everyone who's used our auto kick aura before, it functions exactly the same. If you're someone who likes sounds, you can always come into the custom options and change how the sounds work. But it's usually phone for when you're next, air horn for when you're up. It's fairly straightforward. But that's just like forever, as long as those bosses are alive, which will be the whole fight. They have to be kicked. So just be aware. Frost guy, lightning guy, kick them. The other 2 bosses are
real quick.
Also, sorry.
Real quick. How much setup of that kick weak aura are our raiders gonna have to do?
None.
For
unless
those
they
fights.
Want to change the sounds.
Those are gonna be pre-set up for everybody, and will just work right out of the gate.
It's the note. The note sets it all up. I've already customized all the like spell IDs and player IDs and everything like that. So as long as you download the package, unless you want to change the sound that it makes, you don't have to change anything.
Very cool.
Yep. Okay. Good question. In the past, we've had some setup, but there shouldn't be any configuration unless something goes egregiously wrong. So you'll note all the boss rooms are circles. This boss room's no different. It's also a circle. We kind of move around the room in a similar pattern to what we did on Aranog, right? You kite the boss away from the shit. The shit that you're kiting away from changes, though. So there's kind of 4 core mechanics. One is Earth Boss makes Earth Spikes. The Earth Spikes interact with other things, but we'll put the Earth Spikes behind where we're going. Should have gotten some water before I started this. We'll put the Earth Spikes behind where we're going, and then we'll move away from the Earth Spikes. Fire Guy breaks the Earth Spikes, so he'll put fire on someone, and that person will go stand on the earth spikes and shatter them so that we have room for new earth spikes. And shattering earth spikes also puts fire on the ground. The fire interacts just like Jaina. You touch fire to take less frost damage, and you take frost damage to take less fire damage. So those guys conflict with each other. There's a couple other interactions, but like the main movement around the room is going to be put spikes behind the boss, put fire on spikes, move bosses so that they're near enough to fire that people can dip in, near enough to spikes that they can do other things. It's a fairly straightforward back and forth with that. There's more to this, but like the basic movement is that. One thing to note, this is something that I didn't see in the videos, but something that just like strat-wise makes a lot of sense. At the start of the fight, the pillars favor ranged. At the start of the fight, we want to have like maybe 3 ranged in the middle of the room to bait some pillars there so that we've got them. Because we'll just want those pillars in the center of the room for later use. And if we did, like, if we're doing the strat correctly, we should always be shattering most, if not all, of the pillars behind us. So we'll want to have some pillars assigned as perma up. And that'll just be in the center of the room as we move around the room so that you always know where to go if you get one of the other mechanics. The bosses, it's not like a kill one first setup. They've gone through a couple different iterations with this boss. When you kill a boss, it retains all its abilities and it does damage to the raid. So kill them together, or as close together as you can get them, or you take ticking damage over time. But the gist is kind of like I was describing. You've got the whole raid trailing the bosses. The tanks are kind of leading the charge here. So that movement balance is going to be something for us to work on. One of the bosses has a frontal tank mechanic, so don't be in front. But people will get targeted with Meteor Smash. Meteor Smash you just take to the earth pillars because it reduces the total damage taken and spawns fire. You need to split this damage with your friend. It's unclear exactly how many people need to split with who, because we haven't seen it yet. My guess is we're probably going to be like 3 people plus the people with the mark. So it's going to be a mix of ranged and healers. If we need to, we may have melee step out too, but if we can accomplish what we need to with ranged and healers, we'll probably go with that. Again, you just need to split it. On heroic, there's no debuff or anything like that, so you can just split without concern. It just does damage. You are able to solo it, so if you are a hunter, mage, someone with an immune, etc., go ahead and call up your solo soaking. Save the raid some damage. The last mechanic is conductive marks, and this is where shit just kind of goes off the goes sideways. So let's talk about how this works pictorially. So but basically, this is where our middle pillars become important. So creating fire on the ground is used to negate the frost mechanic. So over the course of the fight, taking frost damage makes you take more frost damage and makes you slow. You touch the fire that's left on the ground to get rid of the frost damage. That's the whole frost mechanic. It's super easy. So touch grass turns into touch fire. On Mythic, though, we have to be very careful about when we're clearing, because touching fire with a frost debuff removes the flame patch on the ground. If you accidentally touch 2, or like touch 1, take a tick, touch another one, we'll run out of fire and people will get perma-stunned. So personal responsibility on this fight, manage your own stacks, clear your frost stacks around 7 or 8. Fairly straightforward. But you're also just taking ticking fire damage, so the more frost stacks you have, the less fire damage you take. So you kind of you're incentivized to hold it as long as you can. So there's this kind of pattern of pillars are moving back behind the boss, fire is moving back behind the boss, but there's a whole nother set of movement that comes in with conductive marks. And this is where I think this pillar in the middle is going to be really important. So again, you won't see this in the videos necessarily, but I think having a permanent central pillar is going to be important so that you don't have people bumping into each other and spreading shit everywhere. So the conductive marks is just a couple people get marked with a mechanic called conductive mark. The big stone pillars ground the conductive marks. So if you have a conductive mark and you touch the pillar, you lose your debuff. He's free. But anyone stepping into this circle gets it again. So he's going to step in, and he's going to immediately get another conductive mark. So that's why we kind of want to avoid that traffic jam. If we do spread conductive marks, that's okay. Don't panic. We'll just clear and have people not go back into the raid until we've cleared those conductive marks. So it has the potential to just like infinitely chain, but you'll see as people touch pillars, the debuff goes away. It kind of gets eaten by the rock. If you go back and touch someone's circle, you'll get it again. So you'll see they're managing it rather horribly here. It's going all over the raid. You get like 3 of these at a time. Ideally, we should never spread it. And you kind of have a 2.5-second grace period. So if you are someone who gets a conductive mark, step to the middle of the room. Super straightforward, super easy. There shouldn't be anything between you in the middle of the room. People shouldn't just be hanging out over here. Just go to the mid, ground yourself, wait to move back until other people have grounded themselves so that you're not like re-spreading it, and that's it. If we manage this well, the conductive marks are going to be a non-issue. If people are running all over, the conductive marks will be a major pain point on prog. So just something to think about. Like this is a fight where your individual movement, not just positioning, but movement with the mark is going to be something to really focus on. On Mythic, there's a mechanic called Primal Blizzard that just does big frost damage. It'll give you a lot of frost stacks really quick. Again, you touch the fire, frost goes away, same as before, but the patches are gone. If you get too many stacks of frosty debuff, you get tombed. Don't get tombed. Getting tombed is bad. But other than that, on Mythic, there's not a whole lot that's different on this fight. It's fairly straightforward, unless I'm just forgetting about something crazy. But the fire stuff is going to continue to happen. Conductive marks are going to go out. You want to just go get those grounded. If we get behind and people start getting stunned, it gets a little bit chaotic. But outside of that, it's fairly straightforward. This meteor axes thing is what you would take to the pillars to break the pillars and create more fire on the ground. And again, you want to split it with your friends. So there's a lot of splitting mechanics here. And then you want to split it, and then you want to scoot because there's fire on the ground. So fairly straightforward council fight. You'll see that big frontal there. So again, you don't want to be where the tanks are. But depending on how it works on Mythic, with the ability to remove fire from the ground, the strategy of move the bosses in a circle around the room may go away, though I don't really think it will. I think it'll still be easier to handle the tank frontal and everything else that's going on. But you'll see here, multiple bosses are casting constantly. Every one of those casts is going to be like 50% of someone's health. So that's why we have the kick rotation set up. And we'll just go from there. Again, not a ton going on with this fight. It's just a lot of... It's basically taking the positional requirements of Taros and tripling it. So there's just a lot to keep track of. But once you get used to looking for the different things, it's actually fairly straightforward. It's move out with pillars, move to the pillars with fire, ground yourself in the middle with conductive mark, step in fire when you have too many stacks of frost. That's it. You're done. Questions on council?
I'm pumped for this fight.
I'll just take grounding totem.
There you go.
Easy. Yes. Tragically, grounding totem does not work on this, or when Dethea comes, when Dethea comes back later. Dethea. This is not Dethea's only appearance in the raid. There's Dethea again in a little bit. So hype.
Dethea 2 Electric Boogaloo.
Dethea 2 Electric Boogaloo. Exactly. Okay. Hang on, I'm gonna close my WoW. My thing is freaking out. That's better. Okay. Cool. So that's council. I heard people saying I'm hyped for this fight. Was there a question in that, or are we good to keep rolling here? Okay. Onward re-roll. Spooter. Spider Boss is one of the first bosses where we may have people potentially AoEing. But basically, it's just ring around the rosy with a spider. There's a spider in the middle of the room. Tanks hang out with your spider friend. Melee, you're killing a spider. There's also a bunch of ads. And the fight, you're basically just continuously moving up a big circle, going up some stairs, continuing to hit the spider, hitting new ads. It's fairly straightforward. There's a couple other mechanics to pay attention to, but it's WoW on ice. There will be ice patches on the ground. You're very slippy on them. It's not like you touch it and you slide forward and you don't stop until you reach the end of the ice, but your movement is fairly limited on the ice patches. You're slow and your controls are squishy. If you hit left and you're traveling right, it'll take a long time for you to decelerate and then accelerate. It just introduces acceleration. Tanks, you guys are just trading big ad and boss back and forth. Not a whole lot to do for you guys on heroic. If people fuck up and get stunned, your job is to bring a little spider to them. So bring a little spider to them and then call for DPS to kill that little spider so that they can get unstunned. The little spiders are handy in that they do that. Folks will get targeted for sticky webs. You basically leave a little trail. Think any boss that's ever fired a laser at you. You run away from the laser leaves shit on the ground. It's that, but it's spiders. You'll get webs flung at you. We want to kind of put the webs as if we were going around a circle. So don't put it radially. You want to kind of travel along the circle so you create a little wall. It'll be evident why that's important in a second, but there's kind of a lot to unpack here. We're always going clockwise. We're going up, up, up. It's just a lot of phase one over and over again, just across different platforms. So the fight goes where you pull, you single target, and I can't emphasize this enough, you single target nuke the big spider. You don't giga cleave the little spiders. We need the little spiders. They are our friends. And then you're just doing big boss damage. There will be instances later in the fight where we cleave. This is not one of them. And then you're doing boss damage. And eventually the boss will climb up. You'll climb up. Again, just by going up some stairs. It's not harder than that. And then you'll do it again. You do it 3 times until you get to the top. And then you run out of room. So you run out of room. You go to the top. That's it. The big sort of okay, it's time to go mechanic is when there's just shit all over the ground and you don't have space to do anything anymore. The boss will occasionally cast Gossamer Burst, which doesn't do what it sounds like it does. It pulls you toward the boss. So when the boss is casting Gossamer Burst, you want to actually, as a raid ghost, stand behind the sticky webbing so that you don't get pulled into the spider's lair. Because if you get pulled to the spider's lair, you fall off the platform and you die. Don't fall off the platform and die. So boss is going to cast Gossamer Burst. It's a long cast. Just go run behind the webs. When you touch the web, you'll slow down, and then you're fine. If you stand in the webs, you get a stack. It doesn't matter what the debuff's called, but when you get 10 stacks, you get stunned. On Mythic, when you get 5 stacks, you get stunned. Getting stunned is not the end of the world, but if you do get stunned, don't panic. Calmly call for your tank friend to bring you a little spider. That little spider needs to die under your webbed up little corpse. And when that spider dies under your webbed up little corpse, you will be broken free. So that tanks, you kind of have a secondary mechanic here if people get stunned. In P2, people will get stunned. It's not avoidable. and so we'll get to that in a second. But from a phase one standpoint, it's just there's a lot of stuff. There's stuff on the ground. There's stuff to avoid. There's webs that, like, if you look at the floor here, it's just gross. You want to do your best to stand in as little stuff as possible, and only be behind webs when you need to. This is the pull mechanic. You'll see people get in or behind the webs. If you're in or behind the webs, you don't get pulled. Other people got pulled. You can do things like disengage, vengeful retreat, hover, you name it, blink to stop the pull. So that's kind of your own destiny there. But the recommended strat is just stack up and go through a web. It doesn't matter if you have a couple stacks. Outside of that, you're just going up, up, up. You do that 3 times. So 3 sets of big ads, 3 sets of little ads, 3 times hitting the boss. You get to the top, and the boss is no longer dangly. The boss will be on the platform. Tanks will tanker at the end. So you come up over here. Tanks, you're going to have a long way to run to get the boss and drag her to the end of the platform. So just be aware of that. It's tempting to use movement to like quickly get up. But, you want to kind of do this. So I think the play based on platform timing is every Gossamer burst, you move up a tier. So it was about 2 minutes on a platform, and then you're moving up, and then you're back on the boss and on some ads. So just be aware of that. 2-minute classes, you're going to be happy. Phase 2 is a little bit more complicated than phase 1. So you do 3 phase 1s, and then you do a phase 2. Phase 2 is there's kind of one new mechanic, and then a lot of the other stuff changes a little bit. So the one new mechanic is you drop puddles. So the whole raid will drop a puddle. Our goal will be to drop on one half of the platform and then kind of use the other half of the platform for that. My understanding is that these will clear themselves. They fade, so ideally we're just kind of juggling back and forth. The puddles that you drop aren't I took damage because I walked in the puddle. It's I touch the puddle and I go flying puddle, so you'll fly off the platform. These can be cleared, and I think, actually, no, they did change it. Sorry, misinformation there. These will have to be cleared. They no longer just fade. So we'll need cloaks, turtles, bubbles, specific things that will need to be assigned on higher difficulties to clear these, so that we can go back and forth. But we'll eventually become a little bit strapped for space, but this last phase is kind of a lust and burn situation, so ideally we don't have to do more than one set of clears at the top so that we can go top, bottom, top. Outside of that, the webbing mechanic is a little bit different. Now, instead of boss shoot laser, stuff goes on ground. It's you will get stunned, and you'll get knocked back from your current facing. It's unclear from the guides and from what I've read if you get knocked back from where you're looking or knocked back radially from the boss. I believe it's radially from the boss, but I haven't seen anything that confirms definitively one way or the other. If it's from your facing, we would want to get knocked back sideways. If we can't do that and it's unavoidable, then sure, we can get knocked backwards. The people who get this mechanic on them will be stunned. So when we get to the top, we'll put a world marker down. If you get this mechanic, go stand on that world marker. That's not though where you'll eventually be. So tanks, when you're clearing these folks out, they'll actually get knocked back while stunned, and the little ads have to be killed on top of where they are, not where they were. You'll again leave sticky webbing. Gossamer Burst still exists in this phase. Minor note. Instead of pulling you to the boss, it pushes you away from the boss. So you want to stack in front of where the sticky webbing is so that you get knocked back into the sticky webbing and it can walk back forward. Outside of that, it's fairly straightforward. If you want to see kind of briefly what that looks like after this here, so you'll see these people were up here, got the webbing, They dropped webbing as they traveled, and now they're stunned back here. Until somebody brings a spiderling to them. Oh, and now we're back in a different phase. Sorry, I jumped to a poor point. Where is it? He's messing with me here. Okay, so yeah, you drop your puddles. They did a bad job here. But then after that, you're doing your thing. Some people will get stunned, and then Repelling Burst will happen. Repelling Burst is just like Gossamer Burst, but it knocks you back fairly far. If you get knocked back into other things that knock you back, you're getting more knocked back. It doesn't like knock you back toward the boss. It knocks you further away. Don't do that. But basically, so here's the web. You're going to go stand on the marker. You're going to get knocked backwards and stunned. These spiderlings are what the tanks then bring to these people, and then ideally you kill one spiderling. You don't want to kill many spiderlings, because if you get hit by this and you're not stunned, you take a ton of damage, and each time you get hit, you'll take more. So if you're stunned, it's okay. You don't take the damage. If you're not stunned, you take big damage. So eventually, this spiderling that's right here will die, and the people that are stunned get unstunned. Ideally, that happens when the whole raid isn't dead, but you get the gist of it. This one's kind of a little bit easier to learn by seeing. And I do want to talk mythic mechanics for this guy, but then kind of going forward, we won't hit mythic mechanics because we'll do further sessions of these where we also talk mythic mechanics. So we'll focus on heroic from here. On mythic, the unique element is that Gossamer Burst always happens when you need to be going up, and all of the staircases are slippery. So the tech is to use a gateway. So you'll see here, everyone's kind of moving up. Some people with movement abilities are dealing with it, but you'll see this pull in X seconds counting down in the middle of his screen. Whole raid's hanging out near the gateway. Spider's moving up to the next platform. Here comes the pull. The pull happens when this cast completes in all difficulties. On Mythic, though, because you're on the stairs when this is happening and there's not webs at the top of the platform, you either have to wait on the current platform where you can't hit the boss, or you take a gateway right when the pull is happening and the pull never occurs. So get those gateway control shards. If you don't have a gateway control shard, do it. But you take the gate, the pull happens, you still get pulled a little bit, so kind of run back toward the wall, and that's that. Otherwise, on Mythic, everything else is the same except for you get stunned at 5 stacks instead of 10. So again, you wait to take the gate until the cast is like at least 50% of the way done. You're gathering around the gate. You take the gate and then you run towards the wall because this is still slidey, but you have acceleration from the gate propelling you, and then you'll live the Gossamer Burst. So that is Senarth, the spider. Questions?
This is a cool fight.
For that one, do we have a weak aura that kind of like Paintsmith where we've got like a take gate now type thing?
No, not yet. It's something I can look at building.
There will definitely be one. I mean, outside of just like you can look at the timer.
Yeah, it's all
ideally
based
you have
on
that
the
visible
boss's
somewhere.
cast bar. It's not as arcane as like where the 3 different pieces of the precisely timed thing. It's just I know I can live if I take the gateway at this point in the cast. It's just
I
more
think
than
with
50%, you should be good.
I think with a max range gateway, like you can just have someone call it at like 0.5 seconds left on the count on the cast, and you can just take it then.
Yep.
I don't think we need to overthink this with the weak ore.
No, agree. Like this is one where there's not a ton of perfectly timed stuff going on. The only thing is just the boss's casting. You can kind of watch it progress yourself, whether it's a weak ore or the boss's cast bar.
Okay, I wasn't sure like if you needed to all do it at the exact same time type deal.
No. There's no interaction with like the raid having to be pixel stacked to spawn ads, things like that, which was a big part of the Paintsmith logic. This is just don't get yoinked off the platform.
I was going to ask if that is intended. Is that like that's because it seems like it's on the line of like, oh, they're taking the gate to not get yoinked, but you still get pulled a little bit. Is that like, are they gonna?
I mean, I don't know
Are we
how else you
relying
would
on
live.
that, or
I don't know how else you would live on the ice, candidly.
It
But it's like
it
Gossamer Burst is
would
every 2 minutes, Gateways every 2 minutes. It seems fairly intentional.
if that was not the
Okay.
intended, they would have already fixed it.
right?
So.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, this seems like fairly straightforward tech. The one note for Warlocks is when you're making the gate, don't make the gate so that you get the furthest up. Make the gate so that it's from the front of the platform to the back of the front of the staircase to the back of the staircase, so that you're away from the boss when you land. But outside of that, fairly straightforward. But again, this is Mythic only. On Heroic, you won't be on the stairs when Gossamer Burst is happening, so it's all good. For the last 3 here, we won't really talk about the Mythic specific mechanics in too much depth, because we'll have further sessions of these, but I do want to kind of talk about what they do. All right. 20 more minutes tops. I'm going to zoom through Dethea again, because Dethea again is super easy. Dethea again is basically Zymox. It's Zymox, but it's lightning. There are ads on faraway platforms. There are big ads. You kill the big ad. It knocks you to the platform. We'll split out into 2 different groups. It'll be roughly half the DPS and half your healers. Fly across. Kill a bunch of ads. Kick as much as you can. Kill the other big ad that's the same as the big ad that was here, and fly back. Warlock gates don't reach. They very intentionally did that. But basically, it's kill boss. You'll get conductive marks on you. They time out. Don't share them with your friends. Go kill the big ad when it's time to go kill these ads. Position so that you're either getting knocked into the platform if you're not in the kill group, or out to the other ad platform if you are in the kill group. This becomes more confusing on Mythic, but the gist of it is very much still the same, and we won't go too much into that. There are tornadoes that fly around, but outside of that, you're kind of just killing the boss. There's not a whole lot to this fight. Conductive marks on Mythic difficulty, the one thing to note here, because this mechanic is kind of non-existent on Heroic. On Heroic, this fight is going to be super easy. But on Mythic, you take the conductive marks to ads to ground them, and you just go touch your favorite ad. Takes a second for it to go. But basically, you're going to get knocked to the other platform. On the other platform, it's just a bunch of ads. You're cleaving. You don't, and I can't say this loudly enough, you don't want to kill the skull ad before you're done killing the little ads, because killing the skull ad will trigger the get knocked back to the other platform mechanic. And if the other ads aren't dead, you're just going to take a ton of damage for the rest of the fight. It's not a wipe, but it's going to put a big strain on your healers. But the tornadoes move. Don't be in the path of the tornadoes. There are marks out. Don't get marked. The boss will do like push-pull mechanics. Just kind of run against it a little bit. Like you'll see here, you just kind of run against it. And you're kind of just loosely spread out. Again, you're loosely spread so that you don't get hit or you don't spread conductive marks. And you're kind of just arrayed around the boss, right? Tanks are far away from the group. You got your melee spread around the boss, not touching each other. Your healers between your melee and your ranged spread across. It's a fairly straightforward layout. There's not a ton going on this fight. And yes, it is Dethea again, but Dethea has ascended into a wind elemental. She's no longer just on the Primal Council. So, woohoo, Dethea. Okay, Kurog. There's a lot. This is a lot. I'm gonna go quick. I would encourage folks to rewatch just the Kurog specific section later. If you have a question, please jump in, because we're going to be sort of talking about the fight in 5 different chunks. I will not be going through the Mythic mechanics here, so basically every odd-numbered thing is Mythic specific. We won't be talking about those here. The gist of the fight is Kurag is a shaman. There are 4 elemental altars here. When you go to an elemental altar, you get mechanics associated with that altar. For each time the boss does his alt at an altar, he does more damage of that type. So if you go to the fire altar, you'll slowly take more fire damage over the course of the fight. If you go back to the fire altar later, you're going to take a lot more damage. No matter which altar you go to, the raid is always taking ticking damage. So healers, there's always a lot to heal. And we're going to kind of break down each altar. One thing to note, though, is you only start to take increased damage when the boss casts their ultimate ability or their 3 ability. Someone was memeing in the, like, this will be on the test. But there are just 3 different abilities. There's damage happens, there's dodge this, and then there's an ultimate ability for each type. So the order will go damage ability, dodge this, damage ability, ultimate. Damage ability, dodge this, damage ability, ultimate. Just over and over and over. Ideally, we would not... you would change phases between the second damage ability and the ultimate. So you would come to an altar, you would go damage ability, dodge this, damage ability, ultimate, damage ability, dodge this, damage ability, go to the next altar. Is kind of the gist of how it's going to work. We'll kind of have to see how many alts we want to take at an altar before we move on. But that seems to be the relative strat for movement. So the 3 mechanics, damage ability on Fire Guy is also dodge this. It's one of the few where it's both. So the damage ability is he puts a puddle under the raid. So we'll just move as a group kind of around the lip of the altar here. So the raid will be stacked on 1. He'll put a fire pool under the raid. We'll move to 2. He'll put a fire pool under the raid. He'll move to 3. And tanks, you're kind of just leading the raid ahead. Fairly straightforward. The boss's 2 ability is he makes a big ol' X of fire around him. Don't be in the fire. The boss's 3 ability, and this is why we're all stacked, is Dark Recital. Or if you don't like Dark Recital, it's the Stone Legion General's Earth Spikes thing. Where you have to run in a single direction. Some of the people will have the debuff, some of the people won't have the debuff, but that's his ultimate. Kind of what that looks like is, so here's fire pool on the ground, get out, but then you stack back in as a raid. Boss will make an X, there's the X, dodge the X, you'll stack back in. Eventually, the boss will do his alt. Here's another magma burst, right? The boss will do his alt. It looks like Dark Recital. So here it is. So you want to be stacked as a raid, and then Dark Recital comes out. You don't want to book it. You don't want to do what that Evoker and Mage just did and use a big movement ability. This is controlled movement. If you just W key in a direction, you will live. It's okay. Don't big move.
It's the exact same mechanic as SLG.
Yes.
Like the exact same.
Yes, and there's even a weak aura that says, hey, you've got the debuff, you're running. Or, hey, you don't have the debuff, it's okay to step out. It's the exact same mechanic. It's just fire. That's the Fire Guy. So again, we have weak auras that manage that portion of the fight for us. Woohoo. But again, fire, that's just fire side. On Mythic, there's an ad. We won't talk about that today. We'll get to that another time. Frosty Space. The frost damage effect is just it makes a soak me thing. We'll just have 2 soak me zones. One will be circle, one will be star. Star will be your melee people. So it seems to always go 1 ranged, 1 melee. You just always stack in, split the debuff. There's no reason not to do it. So we'll just have a range stack group and a melee stack group. The dodge me mechanic is kind of like Tazavesh a little bit. The the 3-boss fight where the dude channels and makes lightning balls that come out. It's basically... Wait, did they go Earth next in this guide? No, they do. It basically just emanates frost away from the boss. They do go to the Earth. Well, that's confusing. Where's Frost Guy? That's a pain. Maybe I just went too far. Come on. Here we go. So it makes these little circles around the boss. After a second, they'll pulse outward from the boss. It's a lot like Halls of Valor, too, for those who've done Halls of Valor. If you get hit by those, you get stunned for 3 seconds. Don't get stunned for 3 seconds. So you want to just move where they're not, dodge. There's always a hole. So melee, you're just going to have to stay frosty. But if you do get hit, you get stunned, and you take a big chunk of damage. So don't do that. These are the Soki circles. We'll be split into 2 groups for those. The ultimate ability for this is Absolute Zero. He does just a big old chunk of frost damage. It's not a big deal. The one thing to note, and why we're split into 2 groups, is you never want to Venn diagram those. If you Venn diagram those, you also get stunned. The frost side is pretty straightforward. But that's pretty much it for frost. Earth side is going to be a shit show for healers. Just the healers on heroic is not that bad, but on mythic, get ready. There's kind of 3 things that go on here. There's a stomp, kind of like Tectis, or Sledge Fist. The boss will do a stomp. Unlike Sledge Fist, though, it does an area. Then it does the next ring after that. So melee, you'll run out. The thing will happen. You'll run in, and then ranged, you'll also want to run in. So the raid will want to be gathered on the lip of this. So move out and then move in. After you dodge, there are going to be ads that spawn. It looks like these are just spikes. In all of the guides, the videos that you watch on beta footage, these are just elementals that can be moved. But it looks like these are just spikes. Kill the spikes. That's pretty much it. The spikes are fairly straightforward. The one thing that makes this hard, the damage mechanic in this phase, is damage and a big ol' heal absorb, which is no bueno. So there's a lot of damage that happens in this phase and giant heal absorbs that go out. So tanks, you're still doing your swappy thing, but here's you'll see the dodge mechanic is this seismic rupture. You want to dodge this, and then it spawns these ads. These ads, again, from what I can tell in the journal, these don't move around. They aren't movable ads. They look like just spikes that pop out of the ground. So these need to be burned down ASAP because they do pulsing damage to the raid, and they also apply their own heal absorb effect as well as a vulnerability effect. So they do this to the tank. This is going to be a big scary moment for tanks. Be ready to have cooldowns up. But DPS, that's your big cleave moment. Have fun. Healers, there's a lot of spot healing in this phase, so just get ready for it. Okay, lightning side. Lightning side is there's 3 mechanics. It's all kind of positionally related. This is one where it's just get out with stuff. So there's going to be a static pool on the ground, which is just like marks on the ground. Go touch the static pool. Hang out in it, and it'll dissipate. If no one's in it, the raid dies. So we just need 1 person per pool. We don't need 2 people in a pool, but there's a bunch. Go stand in them, or we die. 2 people will get marked. Sorry? Did I hear someone? Okay. 2 people will get marked with a big old circle around them. This is not a soak me circle like the frost side. So frost, go in. Lightning, go out. So just take it out of the raid. And then finally, the avoid mechanic isn't really an avoid mechanic here. It's actually a link. It's kind of like N'Zoth, where you huddle with a friend. Basically, you want to have a linked person, or like a zappy person, and a non-zappy person. Because the zappy people take 75% more nature damage, and you do damage to the closest player for 10 seconds. So if you're a zappy person, you want to get out, right? Make room, and then you want to hang out with a non-zappy person. It's okay if you zap a couple people, like 1 or 2 times, but you do take a fair bit of extra damage. Then that's the mechanic that you get out with. This Boomkin was kind of spooky. He ran in. But after that, so again, it's just stack with a friend, whether you do or don't have the debuff. If you don't have the debuff, find someone with a debuff. If you do have a debuff, get away from other people with the debuff, and then plant. So it's kind of like 1, 2, plant. And then these are the runes. There's going to be runes on the ground. You want to go stand in the runes. Again, only one person needs to be in a rune. You just need to soak it. If you don't soak it, if this one goes unsoaked here, the raid dies. It doesn't matter the difficulty, the raid dies. So it's just soak the pools. And that is phase 1. Phase 2 is kind of an intermission. I think it's at 66 and 33%. Based on the altars that you visited the most, you get 2 ads. Those ads do a bunch of different things. On Mythic, they do even more things, but on Heroic, it's the easiest ads, I think, are the Fire ad and the Wind ad, but these are coincidentally 2 of the more mechanically challenging pieces in Phase 1. So easy ads in the intermission tie in with mechanically challenging in P1, but you're just killing ads. Fire ad puts pools on the ground, don't stand in the pools. They spawn ads, kill the ads. And he'll mark a single player to get out of the group. The Wind ad does literally nothing. It occasionally shadow steps behind someone and channels Mind Seer on them. It does very trivial damage. The Frost ad does big damage to people who are far away and has a kick effect. Again, you just stack near the Frost guy. The Earth guy does Earthbreaker missiles from Halandris. Again, they really liked Halandris. They'll put swirls on the ground, don't stand in the swirls. And then as far as I can tell, the Earth guy is the only intermission ad with a tank swap. The Earth side is like the tanks have to deal with shit side. So again, the strategy in Heroic seems to kind of just go like Earth Storm, or Earth Frost, because Earth is not that bad on Heroic. On Mythic, who knows? We'll figure it out. And then in P3, it's like a soft enrage. After the second intermission, we lost and we were in the boss. He just does constant ramping damage to the raid. It's just a lot of primal breaks. But we don't actually need those on here. P3 is just Lust and Burn. It's a soft enrage. It will eventually just die if we spend too much time in the phase. So this is a big DPS check. If we don't have enough damage for this, the boss will do more damage throughout the whole fight. The longer you spend in phase 1, the more damage he does over the course of the fight. The longer you spend in P2, the more damage he does over the course of the fight. So it's just a big old DPS race from start to finish. There's a lot going on with this boss. There's even more on Mythic, so we won't unpack that. But any high-level questions on the Heroic mechanics? Okay. This is one where we posted guides from 2 different content creators. I think the second one was honestly really good for Kurog. It covers both Heroic and Mythic, but I would give that one a read if the things that we talked about here, you're just doing big head scratching. Okay? Cool. Diurna. There's no raid plan for Diurna. The reason is the QE Live guide is super good. So rather than reinvent the wheel, we're going to quickly talk about the QE Life Guide. It's N'Zoth. You have a very specific scripted route that you're moving through the boss room with tanks. It's going to take some growing, right? It's just like very specific, like do these 2 eggs, then do these 2 eggs, then do these 2 eggs, and just like constant repositioning. There are specific orders that the ads need to spawn in for things to be optimal. But the base mechanic on this boss is as you crack eggs, the boss can take damage. For each egg uncracked, the boss is immune to a certain point. So like at the start, I think you could damage the boss to like 80% or something. And then for each egg you break, you can damage the boss 2% more. So over the course, so the fight is very scripted in that regard, and it's just a dance. So the tank movement is super important. The DPS movement is super important. But you can kind of see the cycle of what you're doing. So you go to an ad spawn, the boss will do the eggs, you kite the beam to the incubating eggs, and then one of the tank and a set of DPS hang out to kill the ads that spawn. So this is a 2 people get a ton of responsibility fight. The boss will incubate an egg, which looks like this. It means an egg will force hatch shortly. The boss will then also sticker staff on the ground. There's a big old staff. You get an extra action button. Only 2 people can click this extra action button, but it will make a line from the staff to the player. So a big old zappy thing will come out of the staff right here to the player. If you kite that through the egg, the raid takes some damage, but the egg doesn't hatch a big ad. It only hatches a small ad. So 2 people who know what they're doing are to be assigned will kite through that, and so that big ads don't spawn, and then you just get a little whelp instead of a big old proto dragon. On higher difficulties, there are more ads, but basically, when you crack an egg, the boss gets a big enrage. So tanks, as far as I can tell, you just want, like, there's no super scripted taunt swap in this. It's just you guys kind of swap on the egg cracks because you need to make sure you have a big button up for when she enrages. It's like a soft enrage for 10 seconds or something. There's also a Earthbreaker's Missiles-esque mechanic here. Wildfire spawns. It's a little circle around you. It does a little bit of damage, and then later it does more damage, and a dot. But basically, it's just ads galore. You don't need a ton of massive cleave. It's like 3 ads at a time. But basically, it's just the same thing, rinse and repeat. The one thing to note, just again from a boss positioning standpoint, if the boss is near ads, the ads do more damage and heal constantly. So we don't want that. And that is pretty much the whole fight. I would encourage folks to kind of read this page in detail because it does describe sort of the order that you do things in eggs with eggs. There are specific ads on higher difficulties that have more nuance. But basically, this is also a boss where we have kick weak auras set up because each time big ad spawns, which there are 4 of for the 8 ad sets that you'll have throughout the fight, you also get mages that need to be kicked. But it's basically kill ads. For each ad that you kill, you can damage the boss more. So this isn't a fight where we're going to have people just like big tunneling the boss and it's a race to get it down before we get a ton of ads. We have to kill the ads. So just buckle up. And then phase 2, which it's unclear when this actually phases. I think it's when you run out of eggs, but it's not clear. The tank debuff gets longer, the staff does more damage, and if you get hit by the ice mechanic that you're supposed to be dodging, you get frozen. So it's kind of a soft enrage again. You're working your way through, and that's pretty much it. And that's what we know. But again, the dance with that, with the staff is really the important part. Again, it's just go to a set of eggs. Rapid incubation happens. The people who know what they're doing click the extraction button that pops up. So here it pops up. You click it. You get a beam on you. You kite that beam through an egg. It spawns a little whelp instead of a big old whelp. Every 2 ad sets, we get more ads. There's 3 dragons. They do different things. There are other ads that come with them. We have auto markers set up for the Stormbringers or mages. These need to be kicked. The cast that they do does a stupid amount of damage. That's pretty much it. There's a lot going on in this fight. The last 2 are significantly harder than any of the other ones that we've talked about so far. So we'll have separate recaps of this in more detail, especially as we're going into Mythic. But I do want to kind of stop here. An hour and a half was the cap that I wanted to give myself. So we're right on the money. But any questions, whether it's raid specific or sort of about next steps when it comes to getting prepped here?
Could we just get that link for that audit sheet?
You can make your own in WoW Audit.
Is there a reason we just don't use one, so not everyone has to make one?
We used them before.
I can
Like
send
deal
the
with the
link.
link?
I don't know. Yeah, we can just do this. Anyone can view. Huzzah.
That's definitely what the issue. I think our last ones were always just public.
Okay. There it is. But for future reference, if you ever are like, I don't know where the link is, you can just go make your own.
If I remember correctly, the drop-down menus won't work as a viewer.
No?
I think that's why you need to make a copy, but...
Yeah. Either way. Up to folks.
What about the last boss? Anything about that?
Nothing.
Has anybody said anything?
Nope. I mean, it wasn't even tested, so TBD.
I know, but some people theorize stuff.
Yeah.
My theory is there's going to be lightning mechanics.
Yeah.
Maybe dragon flying.
There'll be a dragon. Kieran, you want to bet?
Dragon. Big old lightning.
Lots of noodle arms, little noodle arms.
Yes, little noodle arms.
I have one question about the raid.
Yeah.
Is mayonnaise an instrument?
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks.
It depends if you put it in a flute or not.
Okay, thank you.
I put it in my food all the time.
Cool. All right. I know this was a lot of info in a long period of time, so I appreciate everyone kind of hanging in with me. The raid plan links are all in the raid channel. You can check those out. I would encourage people to get the Week Aura pack. I will potentially be posting updates to the Week Aura pack in the next couple of days, but it's just going to be the exact same link. You can just go download the updated version. Again, no configuration required, both for raid leads and for raiders. The only thing that has to get done is notes, and we'll talk about those. For my folks who have assist or tank privileges in the raid, I don't think, Elzer, you're not a DBM user, are you? Thank God. Okay. Good. All right. Then where's Zesty?
That's funny.
Where's Zesty?
Who uses
All right.
DBM, dude? I use Recount too, by the way. Just saying.
Oh my God.
Wow,
I'm joking.
grandpa over here.
Oh, dude, look at DBM. The only thing nice about DBM is the voice though. Whenever I see someone use DBM, they're like, move to the left. It's like very soothing.
Yeah.
Like very calming.
It's nice and relaxed. Well, cool. Well, guys, appreciate the time.